It's all about the macro productions.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tactheratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him.
Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangles in Fort Lauderdale.
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the CS hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you are watching us on band.video, Vigilante TV, YouTube, or you are listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a million. We appreciate your amazing and continued support over the years. If you want to connect with me, macroaggressions.io is the best website to do that. Hopefully you are getting your daily news over at activistpost.com. Sign up for the newsletter. You won't be disappointed. We appreciate our sponsors. They help keep this show going. They help to keep me alive and going as well. My health sponsors in particular. Thank you to the crew over at C60 Power, Ken Schwartz and the team over there. I have got my animals hooked on the formula on C60 every morning. The avocado flavored one. It's an oil, right? You fill up a little spoon and I take it. I've been taking it every day for years now. But my cats are now hooked on it, which is great. But also they want it early in the morning, so some results may vary, but if you have aging pets, if you're looking for the most powerful antioxidant known to man, the guys that discovered the C60 molecule won the Nobel Prize for it. So it's a huge deal. It's a free radical sponge. It travels throughout your body, finding free radicals, resetting them, and then fixing them and resetting it and doing it all over again. It's crazy, the technology of this, but you've never heard of it probably. The best thing to do is to go read about it. Go to shopc60.com and you can find everything there is to know about it. It's fantastic. In fact, Christian Jordanov did a presentation at Anarchapulco where he put a slide up there showing my DNA damage from the testing that I took with him, showing that my DNA damage score is so low it doesn't even have a score anymore. I am literally off the charts with how healthy my DNA is. And for what it's worth, pretty sure you're going to need your DNA. Maybe, I don't know. Definitely in this life, possibly in the next one. I don't know. If you are interested, you can go to shopc60.com. Take a look and find whatever you want. Use the promo code MACRO on your way out to save you a little bit of money. Statements of products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent or mitigate any disease. ShopC60.com. Also, to our friends at Chemical Free Body. They were crushing it at Anarchapulco. They had to bring in reinforcements from last year. It's the most popular booth. Everybody's stopping by, grabbing a green 85 in the morning. I'm just grabbing multiple green 85s throughout the day. And if you are interested, go to chemicalfreebody.com/macro. You will find the greatest green drink out there, Green 85, now in apple flavor. So if you're somebody that's like, I like green drinks, but they taste like shit, we have found a solution. 90% I love it rate when Tim ran the numbers with the people that he tested it out with. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/macro. check it all out. Get the detox bundle, the parasite cleanse. That'll take you a month to do. Get that. That's good. Do whatever you can. Look, nobody's coming to save you. You're going to have to be proactive about your health. These companies can help put you on that path. So for what it's worth, check out our sponsors. We appreciate them. All right. Well, I want to do the presentation that I did at Anarchapulco for you guys because it's super relevant, of course. It is about the media, mainstream media in particular, and our solutions to that. We here at Activist Post and Macroaggressions, you might have noticed, we have a big problem with the media. It is my real hot button issue. It would be one thing if the mainstream corporate horror media was one of the solutions, one of the options that you got to sort of understand the world in which you're living in. But the problem is they suppress all of the other news organizations that are actually talking to you about important topics or giving you solutions to problems that you face or giving you just the honest rundown about what is happening in the world out there. The mainstream media is not doing that. They're not designed to do that. They were created for a much different purpose. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the history of where this came from and talk about the organizations that were behind the creation of the mainstream media. It's not what it appears to be. I think our audience understands that. There's probably people in your life that haven't figured that out yet, that still reflexively turn on the TV, turn on the news, see what's going on. That's propaganda. And I think that Americans are of the belief that propaganda comes from the Soviets in Pravda, and that it's just one of those things that those people over there get lied to by their government, and those poor bastards, they just don't even know that they're being told these incredible tales. The irony is that the people in the Soviet Union who lived through the 70s, the 80s, the propaganda era, they knew it was propaganda. They were fully aware of that. The irony is that in America, we believe that we are above reproach, that we are somehow better, that we can see all the propaganda internationally that's being run on everybody else, but they would never do that to us. And so, in fact, the American people are in a far worse position than the Soviet people were back in the 70s and 80s, because at least they knew they were getting lied to. This is the problem that we face. Now, you're going to interact with people throughout the rest of your life who believe that they are working off of great source material. I felt the same way. We were all probably in that camp, right? If you're turning on the mainstream media and you're listening to what's going on, and then you take that information, you get into an argument with somebody or a debate or whatever, a conversation later that day, and in order to prove your point, you're dragging information that you saw on the news to say, hey, masks work. Or, I saw this thing on the TV last night that talked about how effective vaccines were, right? And if that's the only source of information that you get, then you defend that and use it as evidence in arguments with other people. The problem is you're working off of the wrong source material. You're working off the mainstream media's facts. And those facts are written in pencil. They're completely subjective. And it only matters what you believe to be true. Whether it's actually true doesn't matter. Nobody's going to jail. They're not putting handcuffs on these people for lying to you. In fact, not only are they not putting them in jail, they have taken the extraordinary step of legalizing propaganda to be used in America on Americans. That's the Smith Modernization Act of 2012 that was passed. Well, it was rightly shot down in 2012 when they were trying to pitch this. Then it was stuffed into the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013 and passed along with all the sausage that gets thrown in there. So it's important that Americans understand. Maybe when you were growing up in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, you could make a case that the mainstream media was not overt propaganda. It was, but you could still make the argument that it wasn't. You could drag in a bunch of facts and truths that you found there and say, see, it's not all bad. And maybe you'd have a leg to stand on because it was so subtle. But now, I mean, come on. You take a look around. It's all lies. It's just a matter of degree. And the people who tell the lies on television have been doing so for so long that they don't even know what the truth is. And in fact, in some cases, as like Noam Chomsky talks about in Manufacturing Consent, he's getting into a debate with the BBC journalists, and the journalists say, wait, what are you saying, that I don't believe the things that I say here on the nightly news? And his response was, no, I'm saying if you believe something different, you wouldn't be here. Right? So you're automatically dealing with people who are bought in. You don't work for the corporate whore press unless you're on that team. Now, maybe somewhere along the line, things happen and you have an epiphany and you decide, in a Jerry Maguire moment that you're going to write a midnight manifesto and you're going to leave your job and go off and detach yourself from the mainstream media. I hope you do. But just understand something. You're going to leave that high-paying slot, I don't know, as a local reporter somewhere, and there's 100 people that are going to be in line to replace you the minute you walk away. So the machine isn't going to stop. And for those people who grow a conscience in this industry and decide to walk away, good for you. A lot of respect to those people who break away, who walk away from, for whatever reason. You're walking away from money. And that's always a difficult thing to do. Now, some people prioritize their sanity and self-respect and reputation more than money. You should. But money's a factor. And let's not kid ourselves, right? It plays a role in this. So it's important for people to understand that the mainstream media is filled with human beings. And not all of them are awful. But they're in a system that is never going to allow for the truth to come out because the system was designed that way. And so that's what we're going to start. We're going to talk about how it was designed, who designed it. Some of the, this is not brand new material either, let's be fair, because we have been screaming about the mainstream media for many years. It's my number one target, and not for nothing, they deserve it. They are stenographers for power. They talk the general public into accepting wars against their own best self-interest and better judgment. The mainstream media was put up against the wall and shot in the aftermath of World War II. I'd like to remind the corporate press that was involved in COVID that if it were up to me and about, I don't know, 1 billion other people in this world, you'd be put up against the wall and shot too for your crimes against humanity. The COVID crimes alone. But the thing is about these major transformative events, JFK, 9/11, COVID, common denominator, none of this happens without the mainstream media. The mainstream media is always driving the getaway car. That's their job. Create the narrative, establish the acceptable framework for argument within that narrative, and silence anything outside of that. Make you look crazy, right? When you're early, you sound crazy. I mean, I'm talking to David Icke on the stage. We're doing our sort of interview in front of the live audience, and I reminded him, not that he needs to be reminded of this era in his life, but I made a comment, that, any truth to the rumor that you're going to have to go get knee surgery after all the victory laps you've been taking, the last couple weeks. And, but we also kind of spoke about the time before that, when he would walk down the street, down the sidewalk, and he'd see a mother and daughter walking towards him. They would recognize him and then cross the street so that they didn't have to pass him, So for when you're real early, like 30 years early, like David Icke was, people will literally cross the street to get out of the way, Or as he said, I was doing a presentation for a man and his dog, and the dog wasn't even interested, talking about that. So let's get into this. Let's start with Operation Mockingbird. Okay, because this is an ongoing CIA project. This was started in the early 50s to subvert the original mission of the news, to take the news and not fully scrap it, but add minor variations to it. The best propaganda is like 95% truth and 5% lies. And so it's not so much that you need to put them on that you have to push the message in a 180-degree, fully backwards messaging. In fact, if you do that, it's pretty obvious that you're lying. You don't want to do it. I'm not trying to, teach people a masterclass on how to lie in the media, but I mean, if you've been watching it long enough, you've figured out some tricks. You don't want to push them too far off course. You just want to give them a little nudge, just a little bump, They're headed straight ahead and you want to push them off just a couple degrees, not 180 degrees. That'll draw too much attention to somebody turning around the messaging. You want the messaging to stay consistent, but you want just a little nudge here and there. In the UK, they have something called the nudge unit. It's to get you to think about things a little bit differently. That's the media's role. They can get you to believe absurdities. Give them enough time, okay? So the guys that were responsible for the creation of Operation Mockingbird were Allen Dulles and Cord Meyer. And if you know anything about Allen Dulles or the Dulles brothers, maybe two of the worst, worst is tough because there's a lot of people. Two of the most dangerous figures of the 20th century. The Dulles brothers, especially with regard to American history, the ideas that they put forth, talk about changing the direction of America. It was a little bit more than a nudge with these guys, because it wasn't just the media that they were involved in. As you know, they were creating the CIA, they were funding the Marshall Plan, and there was a lot of money that was sloshing around and wasn't being accounted for. And this was, of course, in the aftermath of World War II, when Europe is smoldering ruins and Asia's on fire, and the United States was unscathed. And in the aftermath of that, the people that's really when America took control. It had been economic powerhouse for half a century, but in the aftermath of World War II, because of the circumstances of how everybody else was in such disarray, America was ready to lead. And unfortunately, the people that took control of this were some of the worst people in the world. And what they did was, see, the CIA had experience running Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty in the early 50s. So CIA gets funded into existence in 47, a couple years after the war ends, but it's not like it came out of nowhere. It was really the OSS, and that sort of transformed into the CIA. So some of the scams they were running in the past would be used later in the 50s and 60s. And one of the things that they did was they during Operation Paperclip, they grabbed a lot of guys, a lot of scientists, a lot of very bright people from the Third Reich. And they taught them a thing or two about propaganda. Now, the original Smith-Mundt Act was signed in 1948, and that was in the aftermath of World War II. And they're saying, hey, look, man, this propaganda can be used for all sorts of terrible things. We, the Americans, are going to make a law that says we're not going to use propaganda on our own people in America. We're still going to use it internationally because it's useful, and where the American empire was just really getting started with how awful they were going to be. And of course, propaganda was going to be a huge component of that. So they created the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012 to change the original Smith-Mundt Act of 1948. Now, it wasn't doing anything. It wasn't expiring. It didn't need to be changed. But Obama decided that in order to legalize the lying that he was currently doing and intended to do in the future, they would sign it into law. They would make it so that you now could legally use propaganda inside America on Americans without their knowledge, because we changed that. And so I suggest that you don't take the extraordinary step of legalizing propaganda to be used in America on Americans unless you intend to do it. You wouldn't legalize it and then not do it. So when you see something like this, and I put G7 bank bail-in legislation in the exact same category, you don't take that step of legalizing the stealing of everybody's bank account unless you intend to steal everybody's bank account. So that's coming, and you can use the same logic that you use on the Smith Modernization Act of 2012 and go, well, they did legalize lying, so should I be surprised if there's lying? No, you should not. It's not right, and it should be repealed, and they shouldn't be lying to us, but you should not be surprised, okay? So what happens is that in the 50s, after they'd been running Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, the CIA officers in key management positions were installed in the media across the United States. Now, you don't have to have everybody at ABC News working for the CIA. You just have to have one guy. Now, to be fair, they probably had many guys, but you really only need one guy. If it's positioned right, if he's he's a news editor, he gets to his desk, he makes the call. Not even so much that you need to go change your reporter's story about something. It's just, that's a story that maybe never sees the light of day. You know what I mean? So the propaganda is propaganda by omission as well. In fact, I'd say it's the most devious form of propaganda, because your grandma keeps waiting for this big expose on how dangerous the vaccines are. And she's waiting for 60 Minutes or Fox News or MSNBC to do the big expose and say, guys, we have a story for you. Turns out vaccines are super dangerous, and they've been killing people for a long, long time, and they totally destroy your immune system. If you're waiting for that story on the mainstream media, you're never going to get it. So your sweet grandmother, who means well and is telling you got to vaccinate your baby, she's working off incorrect source material, because the information that she should have gotten, that she should have watched the show on, was never produced, because 60% of the ad revenue that comes into the American news desks, these mainstream media organizations, comes from the pharmaceutical industry, right? So it's never going to happen. So think about that when you're trying to calculate propaganda, when you're trying to measure something that's hard to quantify, because the lies by omission, the stories they never tell, and you could see it with the Amy Robach thing on ABC, when she's like, we had the Epstein story years ago, I took it to them and they spiked it. That's propaganda. They didn't come out and do a story about how Jeffrey Epstein's a great guy. They just prevented you from hearing the story about how he's a horrible guy for a while, and then floodgates open. But the CIA was baked into the mainstream media from the very start. This is the reason why they drive the getaway car. It's not accidental. It's not coincidental. It's not random. The mainstream media exists not to make money. You can make a lot of money with it. It's not the purpose. The purpose is narrative control. The purpose is to make sure that on the animal farm, the animals only know what you want them to know. You don't want them getting ideas about overthrowing governments or how it's working differently over there or how this leader is trying something. No. You need to be kept in a cage with your information, and that's what they do. So Mockingbird is about narrative control. Acceptable outrage kept within certain parameters, okay? JFK, MLK, RFK, moon landing, 9/11, COVID, you name it. You're allowed to debate those within reason. You're not allowed to say that the Jews killed JFK. You're not allowed to say that. Is outside of the acceptable parameters for argument. You can't have that conversation. We will. We don't care if we can. We will do whatever we want to do when we want to do it with regard to these lies. Nobody's going to tell me I can't talk about this stuff, but the mainstream won't do it. So again, you go through life making these assumptions, we all do, that the information you're getting from the organization who's in charge of information, they should be good at it. You make this calculation that it's probably true. Or maybe there's some variation. Or maybe if it's Fox News, they're extra critical of the Democrats. Or if it's MSNBC, they're extra critical of the Republicans. So you make the calculation. You allow for the certain amount of slant to it. But you don't assume that they're just going to outright lie to you. But they will. And they have. And they continue to. Because you know what? It's not only not against the law, it's not against their corporate policy. They have no incentive to tell you the truth. If they were to start the process of instituting the truth, the entire apparatus of America would come down. We have seen how much of the American economy is based on fraud. It's a fraudulent, I think 10% of the American economy is just graft and waste and scams. Money going out the back door to Somalia or Israel or bumblefuck Egypt, who knows? It's just, there's always something going on. And you, with the eyes to see it, are called crazy for pointing it out. You're not crazy. You're just early. So there's a couple of different ways in which the media can lie to you. Visually, if you're watching TV, you're going to see the footage, which they've plenty of times they've lied about the footage. Remember the Kentucky gun range footage? There was like at night, all these tracer bullets, and they're like, this is Afghanistan, everybody's getting lit up. It's like, it's Kentucky. They're doing this at night. It's footage from some other thing that isn't a war being shown by the mainstream media like it is a war. That's a lie. They do that all the time. You have to have your head on a swivel, right? So they'll lie to you visually. They'll lie to you auditorily. The Fox News beacon, the dong, like the gong and the all the sounds that go on, spent a lot of time researching that at Tavistock to make sure it's the exact same tone that signals your brain. It's the reason why slot machines in Vegas are all set to the same tone as well. There's a reason for it. They're not taking this lightly. They're injecting as much science into this as possible to make sure, well, in the case of casinos, that there's no windows and that you can't tell what time it is, and that these machines are making a ding, 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 ding. It's the right pitch for your brain that makes you happy. If it's off by a little bit, then it makes you crazy and you want to leave the casino, right? So they don't want that. They want you to stay there and be happy. Fox News wants you to sit on your couch and be visually pulled in. God, have you ever seen the news from India? It is like a gigantic panic attack. It's Fox News on steroids plus video games. There's flashes going off. There's a scroll going across the bottom third, and then there's a scroll inside a scroll, and then there's things popping. It's panic inducing, but funny too. So then there's subliminal manipulation as well. One of the it won't work. It won't work in this format of showing you, because this is more of an audio podcast than anything. But during my presentation at Anarchapulco, I played the clip from TruthStream Media. Aaron and Melissa Dykes, who, if you're familiar with them, they're a member of the Independent Media Alliance as well. They did a great documentary showing the subliminal messaging at the end of the night back in the 70s. Your television would come to an end at like 2 o'clock in the morning. It would go to snow, for 4 hours or so. Then it would pick up programming the following morning. The last thing they would show you before they went to snow was the Star Spangled Banner, the rockets, red glare, and then the whole thing, right? And they've got the text scrolling across the bottom, and the rockets, red glare, and the bombs bursting in, all that stuff, right? And as those words are changing from one sentence in the verse to the next sentence in the verse, as those letters are changing, they change twice. You have to slow it down, way down. And before it changes from the line you just sang to the next line that you're going to sing, there's a sentence that is inserted in there, letter by letter by letter. As it turns across, it says, trust the U.S. government. So there's subliminal programming in your television back in the 70s. Think about the advances in that technology now, okay? So let's move on to talking about kind of where we are now. We know about what the CIA was doing in the past, but there's an assumption that Operation Mockingbird is over. I mean, you turn on CNN, nobody's watching. Right? You look at Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, and you can almost see the Fabian socialist in her. You can see the wolf in sheep's clothing on her. You just look at her and you go, you're just totally full of shit. I'll never watch that. I'll never watch that show. I am going to find a different source of news that isn't on television. I'm going to go look online. And what do? You wind up in the mainstream alternative media. And this is Mockingbird 2.0. Okay, this is the CIA bros podcast shows, Sean Ryan and Lex Friedman and Alex Jones and all of this. These are guys that are disinformation agents, right? They'll give you 90% truth, 10% lies. They don't even have the decency to give you the 95-5 split. They're going to fill you up with a bunch of lies, right? So if you're getting, let's just start with the obvious. There is no such thing as ex-CIA, okay? Especially if you're ex-CIA who's out there talking about how it used to work at the CIA. Maybe you're ex-CIA retired on a beach somewhere and nobody's talking to you. Fine. But if you're making the podcast rounds, or if you have a show, you're Sean Ryan, and you're ex-CIA, or totally ex-CIA, I'm not working with them anymore. I'm calling bullshit on that, right? Yes, you are. You're just running a new op. Now, maybe you're not technically collecting a paycheck from the CIA. That's never stopped them from paying people in the past, finding a way to make it happen. I know what sheep dipping is. It's when they take you out of the military, put you into the civilian, but you're really in the military. They make you look like a civilian. They sheep dip you, set you out there, but we know who you really are. So what is Sean Ryan? He's a sheep dip CIA asset who's running a podcast. Is there anything wrong with that? Well, I wouldn't go on the show. You know what I mean? I'm not going to walk into that because the problem is that you're dealing with an audience that thinks that everything that he's talking about is true. They don't understand the game. They don't understand the scam. They don't understand that 10% is going to be bullshit with these guys. But it's a sales pitch, and it sounds good because they're not working for Fox News, right? I'm Dan Bongino. I'm just a guy with a podcast. I'm going to work in the FBI. How'd that work? I mean, if that isn't just a perfect encapsulation of this, I don't know what is. Take a look at a guy like Dan Bongino. He's now rotating back into the media, air quotes, to tell you how we're going to go get the bad guys. I mean, it is. I am embarrassed on his behalf because he clearly does not have the capacity for self-reflection. If you're Dan Bongino, the only acceptable outcome for this is that you go kill yourself. Honestly, if you want to retain any bit of your credibility, ritual suicide, I think, is the only way out. The fact that this guy is now back on his podcast like nothing ever happened it's insulting to our intelligence. That's what it is. And if you are somebody who watches Dan Bongino, well, first of all, you're not listening to this if you do. But if there's somebody in your life who is watching Dan Bongino and getting all pumped up about we got to support the troops and lock down the border and all this stuff, you're dealing with a low IQ person who's being easily manipulated. Okay, stop. You have a responsibility in this. It's easy for me to criticize the CIA and the mainstream alternative media and the mainstream media for their crimes against humanity. It's easy for me to do it. It's right for me to do it, and I will continue to do it. But you guys have a responsibility in this too. We all do. And if there's somebody in your life who isn't seeing it, you got to come up with a strategy to get better information in front of their face. I'll tell you right now, Activist Post is a great resource for that. Not because I'm writing the articles. I don't write any articles for it. I can comfortably say it's a fantastic resource and take myself out of the equation because I'm not the one writing the articles. I know the journalists who are, most of them at least, and they are doing outstanding work. So you've got to battle this. The mainstream alternative media, the second version, where it's not on your cable news, but it is on your internet, it's on your phone, it's on your social media. It doesn't look like news, not in the traditional sense. So people let their guard down and think, oh, it's just Sean Ryan having a conversation with this other guy. These guys are just chatting it up like old guys. Well, who's the other guy? Does he have intelligence ties as well? Because I'd like to know that. Because now it's not just two guys bullshitting. Now it's an op. Okay, and if you don't understand who these people are or where they come from, and if you don't understand that Tim Pool is taking his money from the Israelis, then you're never going to understand. You're going to be confused with the messaging. You're never going to notice that it changed. It changed. Once Tim Pool had dinner with Netanyahu, it changed. His show is garbage now. Used to be fun. Used to be. The big criticism was, I'm a fence-sitting, milquetoast, guy. I can't really pick a side. Well, you picked a side, all right, Tim. The wrong side. You picked the Zio side. You picked the side that is currently raining bombs on children, you fucking scumbag. You picked the wrong team. You took the money, and now you have no credibility, and you have nobody to blame but yourself. I've been watching this for years. I've watched you guys self-immolate. Do you know how hard it is to turn down money? I had people approach me with advertising dollars for activist posts. And I'll tell you right now, if I took that money, radioactive for the rest of my life. You have to turn it down. If you're taking the money from these people, you're no better than them. So we talk about that. Tucker, Glenn Beck, Megyn Kelly, Russell Brand. They're talking about interesting things. They're right on the edges. Safe, dangerous, as Sam Tripoli says. Do I love that Tucker Carlson is talking about the dangers of vaccines? I do. It's fantastic. Would have been a lot more helpful in 2021, not 2025. Does me no good then, right? So they make a calculation that the water is safe to enter after we've already gone in there and pissed in it. You know what I mean? We're the ones that were doing the hard work early on. Then they parachute in at the end and go, I think there's problems about this vaccine. Yeah, no shit. I wrote about it in my book in 2017, before the fucking COVID stuff came out. I wrote about how dangerous the vaccines were then. Everybody thought I was crazy. I screamed at my friends in 2020, please, whatever you do, don't take the shots. They'll be rolling out the shots next year. There's going to be the craziest sales pitch you've ever heard in your life. Please, whatever you do, don't take the shots. They all took the shots. So, you have a role in this. If you're getting your information from the wrong sources, change it. It's fixable. We all get a pass, for being lied to by the media. They're very good at it. But you can't know what you know now and still use these sources. You've got influencers now online, bot swarms that make some things appear to be popular and other things unpopular, right? All being manipulated. Social media is a propagandist's wet dream. It's covert, undetectable social manipulation on a massive scale. You get divergent realities. You could have people in the same street living totally different lives based on the feeds, based on demographics, location, age, marital status, political affiliation, time of day, income level. Based on all of these things, the version of the world that is sold to you through your social media feed is curated based on all of this. My reality is different than yours. And I noticed this when I watched it try to manipulate me. I'm hypersensitive to it now. It doesn't mean I'm immune to it, but I'm looking for it everywhere. I'm following it everywhere. You have to be aware that there is a battle for your mind, and most people are losing. They don't even have a handle on their own mind, let alone protecting it from somebody else hacking into it and trying to put thoughts into it. We have confirmation bias in the digital age. You see something that you believe, and then you see it over and over again, and then that belief becomes your reality, whether it's true or not. You're fed that. Feedback loops, confirmation bias, right? So you go down one path and you say, maybe there's some here, I don't know. And you start looking and you find something, then you find something else and you find something, and it starts to confirm the direction that you're going. So you go deeper and deeper and deeper. And this is how you wind up in these ideological rabbit holes. Some of them are dangerous, right? Especially if you wind up in a place like Reddit. Ghislaine Maxwell was one of the top, most influential people on Reddit. Just think about that, right? So, and then you take all this into account, and you start asking questions about social media. Well, yeah, I know social media is dangerous, but I'm not even on it all that much, and it might not be the worst thing. Well, who started the companies? In-Q-Tel is the venture capital firm of the CIA. And when LifeLog closed its doors in February of 2004, which was the CIA In-Q-Tel program to create online profiles of everybody in the country, they folded that program, but opened it the following day under a new name. You may recognize the name. It's called the Facebook. And they gifted that organization to Mark Zuckerberg. You remember the origin story, right? Harvard freshman nerd starts a transformational technological company out of his dorm room with a couple buddies. They leave school early, move out west, start the company, turns into billions of dollars used to manipulate. Who am I talking about? Am I talking about Zuckerberg? Am I talking about Bill Gates? What's the difference? They have the exact same origin story. Have you ever thought about that? It's the same origin story as the guys in Santa Clara, Silicon Valley, Palo Alto. Started this tech company in our garage, our parents' garage, Hewlett-Packard, Google, Apple. Started in our garage. We even took the garage door, put it in the Hall of Fame, garage door. From this is the garage in which Google was formulated. Was it really? Because Google was formulated by In-Q-Tel and the CIA. It wasn't created by Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They were tapped to run that. They're intelligence assets. Social media was designed by the CIA. That's what they do. The first investor into the Facebook, who bought 10% of the company for $500,000. Let me refresh your memory in case you didn't see the movie or forget the names. But that person was Peter Thiel. Magic. Almost like magic. You know what else was happening at the same time that was going on in In-Q-Tel? You know who was the head of In-Q-Tel? Alex Karp. You know what In-Q-Tel was working on in 2004, 2003? They were working on, along with Peter Thiel, they were working on Palantir. So the guys who are working on Palantir magically identify Mark Zuckerberg out of the blue. One of the guys from Palantir, Peter Thiel, puts turns $500,000 into $1 billion. And now Palantir is in charge of running basically all of the AI for the wars going forward. If you're not paying attention to this and you're not keeping track of these origin stories, you'll be thrown for a loop. You'll think, oh yeah, Bill Gates, I know who he is. Mark Zuckerberg, I know who he is. Elon Musk, I know who he is. Jeff Bezos, I know who he is. Do you know Jeff Bezos' grandfather started DARPA? Guys, none of this is accidental. It's happening intentionally, right? And so the government has access to social media companies through a variety of ways. They can either get, let's say, Twitter through Elvis Chan, the FBI's San Francisco office. They can just embed him straight into Twitter to the point where he's sending people birthday cards, right? You could just straight up own the company from its inception, like Facebook, like Twitter. You know, all these guys, Ev Williams, the guys who started, they all went to the Edge dinners with Epstein. They're all on the list. So this is something that people need to understand. Because if you don't understand the origin story of these companies, you're going to mistakenly miscalculate and think, well, yeah, maybe these guys just had a good idea. It's possible, right? Sure, it's possible. But that's not what's happening here. This isn't accidental. This isn't by design. The use of social media was created as the next iteration of Mockingbird, right? And if you thought the government involvement in the media was bad before, it got way worse under Bill Clinton. In fact, in 1996, corporations were finally allowed to cross ownership rights. They were allowed to own multiple organizations. And what you get with that is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Happy 30th anniversary, you fuckers. It was signed February 8th, 1996. It was signed into law. It was just corporate lobbies that were involved in this. They opened the floodgates on mergers and acquisitions in the aftermath of this. This is what Bill Clinton was involved in. He deregulated the telecommunications industry, he deregulated the financial industry, and he created NAFTA. He destroyed America. Bill Clinton is one of the worst presidents in the world in the history of the United States, in part because of what he did economically, and this is part of it. So what happens is that giant corporations just go out there and buy thousands of radio stations, put them all together, media outlets, funded by a variety of sources. USAID, of course, was one of them. They're out there with invisible money overseas that they can make sure goes to helping to, overpay for Vice and make it retarded and gay like Disney did, then write it off their balance sheet 3 years later. It's like, oh, we bought this company Vice and turns out it sucks. Well, no, it was good before. And then you guys got a hold of it and you turned it into woke Vice, and then everybody stopped watching it. And then you bought it for, I think, a couple $100 million, and you wrote it off for zero, which is what Disney does. They take things and destroy it, right? And so what you see is the consolidation of decision-making people, right? So there used to be 50 media organizations. Now there's 5. It's probably going to be 4 pretty soon. But you don't have to get 50 guys to Epstein Island. You just have to get 5, right? So it's pretty easy in this. And so once you centralize the control into the hands of fewer and fewer people, that's when you get problems, right? Because it's one thing if you're trying to sell a bullshit narrative and you've got 50 different news organizations and one of them is like, oh, I think this narrative is crap and I'm going to run a different one because you're lying, right? Now you've got some form of checks and balances. Not the greatest, to be fair, but something. When there's 50 of them, you might get 1 or 2 that go rogue and start talking about things they're not supposed to. But when you've bought all those guys up and put them into 5 corporations, and then you go, well, then we have to trust that those 5 corporations are going to do what's right. Well, it's worse than that, actually. Because what you really need to keep your eye on is BlackRock and Vanguard. Because combined, as of 2023, the Institute for Public Accuracy shows that BlackRock and Vanguard own a combined 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, 13% of Comcast, which is MS Now, CNBC, and Spinco. And they own 12% of Disney, which is ABC, ESPN, and a bunch of other things. They are the largest owner in Sinclair Broadcast Group that has 223 television stations. You know, the compilation where this is a threat to our democracy. This is a threat to our democracy, where they're all the local news channels are all saying the same thing at the same time. That company is Sinclair Broadcasting Group that did that clip. Well, they didn't put the compilation together. Somebody else did. I played that at an Acapulco just to remind people of what's going on. And BlackRock is the largest owner of that group, right? So when you see your local news, you go, it's not it's not Fox News. It's just our local news, right? How bad can our local news be? Well, your local news is owned by BlackRock as well. So it can be as bad as you think it can be. Probably even worse. The BlackRock is the largest owner of Graham Media Group, which has 40 television stations. They just own so much of the media. And so what happens is when you're a group like BlackRock or Vanguard, when you own 18% of Fox, you get a seat on the board. You get multiple seats on the board, right? And so you go, okay, well, what is that good for? Making sure that the news is still the news? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But you know who was the pusher of ESG, environmental, social, and governance? The answer is BlackRock. And that was the question that everybody had. How the fuck do you get all of these corporations to operate against their own self-interest and do something as crazy as install DEI, where you start hiring one-legged retarded Eskimos instead of people who are actually qualified for the job. And you go, I can't believe my business went belly up. The group that was pushing that was BlackRock. And the way in which they were able to do it is because they are on the board of directors of all of these companies. And so they say, you're doing it, or I'll put new management in here who will. So what do? You're the CEO of Fox News, and BlackRock tells you you're gonna put a chick in it and make it gay on everything, and you go, I don't want to do that. And they say, well, do you like getting a $29 million a year paycheck for this job that you have? Because I'll make sure that you get zero, and you're never employable again in the media if you don't do this. That's what BlackRock will say to them. So it gets done. And so you get the wokeism that was shoved down everybody's throat at the corporate level, at the director level. And everyone goes, how the fuck does that happen? It happens because BlackRock wanted it to happen. So if they have enough pull to get every corporation to all of a sudden turn themselves into some sort of trans ideological worship at the expense of profit and loss, to bring in DEI groups that reimagine your entire corporation. If they can do that to companies, they can control the news. Okay? Let's just be real honest about that. So that's the direction that things are going. Now, let's talk about the Israel in the room. Okay? Because if you're not doing that, you're being disingenuous. Okay? I put the graphic on the screen that showed the 5 major news organizations with all of the headshots of the highest ranking people in the organizations with blue Jewish stars all over their faces on all. And I did that to show that the upper management of all the media is run by Jews. Okay. Now, if you may say, what's the problem? Well, I'll tell you what the problem is. There may be no problem. There may be no problem. However, you open up the possibility for a conflict of interest. Now, let's be fair. There is a huge problem with Jewish influence in the media. It has skewed the entire narrative to supporting a bullshit war, turning its back on a genocide that's happening while they're carpet bombing women and children. So I don't give a fuck if somebody says that I'm anti-Semitic for calling out the Jewish influence in the news. It's a verifiable, proven fact that, by the way, when you talk to Jewish people in the media about their control over the media, their response is, yeah, of course we run the media. We know that. If you accuse them of that, they will deny it and call you anti-Semitic. But if you catch them on just in a chat, of course. And the reason why they're so open about that is because it's true. Look, if the mainstream media was run by Catholics, I'd say they were run by Catholics. If they were run by Aztecs, I would say that they were run by Aztecs. There's no Aztecs in major media. You understand who's in charge of this? The Zionist media leadership, Rupert Murdoch, Fox, Arthur Schulzberg, New York Times, Les Moonves, CBS, who then brought in Barry Weiss to now run CBS, Zionist, with the $150 million bribe that was, I guess, for her YouTube channel, which I get more downloads on macroaggressions than Barry Weiss gets on her YouTube channel. 150. By the way, nobody's offering me $150 million because they know I won't sell out my soul and I won't cheerlead for Israel. But you know who will? Larry Ellison. You don't need to twist his arm at all. He's the second richest man in the world officially, although, there's intergenerational banking families and Rothschilds and things like that. But in terms of, what Fortune magazine says, Larry Ellison, number 2 on the list. Activated into buying TikTok and buying Paramount Skydance and buying HBO Discovery and buying every bit of media they can get their hands on. Why? Because Larry Ellison, besides being the co-founder or the founder of Oracle, is a hardcore Zionist Jew who loves Israel and wants nothing more than for America to be destroyed and Israel to take over. which is why it's pretty concerning that on day 2, Donald Trump pulled Sam Altman and Larry Ellison on the stage and offered them $500 billion to run AI for the United States. We have entered into insane territory here. But this is what you do. This is what you do in the media. If you're making funny money, you've got a magic printing press, which they do. Larry Ellison does. He's got Oracle stock. Oracle being a CIA front company, the most well-known CIA front company in the world, and Larry Ellison being worth $400 billion. What is he do? Is he buying TikTok to make money? Is he buying Paramount Skydance to turn a profit? Is he buying HBO Discovery because he needs more dollar bills in his account? No. He doesn't give a fuck if he loses every dime he spent on them. Doesn't matter. There's a bigger play here. Narrative management. Making sure that people aren't allowed to criticize the genocide that's happening. Not stopping doing what you're doing, the genocide. No, we're not going to do that. No, instead, we're going to make sure that you don't see that we're continuing the genocide. That's the real goal here. So CNN, New York Times, News Corp, NPR, CBS News, and NBC News are all fully under Zionist control right now. The stories that you are hearing in your on your television, your nightly news, those are curated by Israel. Okay, just so you know, the entire top management of these organizations are Zionist Jews. The ownership structure is now owned by Zionist Jews. It used to actually be owned by Catholics. I sort of jokingly said if it was Catholics, I'd say it was Catholics. It was. There was a time when it was. But those days are over. So you have C-level Zionist control over the media, which is very helpful for controlling narratives like Iran and World War III, to make sure that no momentum builds for investigating things like the Russia collusion hoax, January 6th, the Mar-a-Lago raid, the COVID crimes, Epstein clients, the Biden auto pen, the 2020 stolen elections, the border crimes, the Soros color revolutions. None of that will get talked about in the mainstream media as long as the mainstream media is controlled by the Zionists. They're not going to dig into Epstein clients. They are the clients. They're not going to get to the bottom of this list. They're on the list. They're not going to investigate the crimes of COVID. They were perpetrators of them. So the media is not going to look into any of this. And that, I think, is the big frustration I have, is that there are people out there that have this assumption that the media will eventually figure this out. They'll report on this story at some point. We'll get the vaccines are dangerous 60 Minutes article. You're not going to. I think that people that make that assumption are fooling themselves. Look, the mainstream media, just for their interactions with Trump, has had to pay $100 million in lawsuits for the untrue things they said about Donald Trump. The irony is staggering. To get sued by a guy, Donald Trump, who is a pathological liar in his own right. A certified Hall of Fame bullshit artist. And he's suing the media for lying about him. Now, I actually love it, right? It's two enemies fighting each other. Who wins? Humanity, of course. But the 60 Minutes edit that the news show 60 Minutes did to edit Kamala's answer, they wound up having to pay Donald Trump $16 million for that. ABC News' George Stephanopoulos claims rape of E. Jean Carroll. They had to pay $15 million for that. George Stephanopoulos is a friend of Jeffrey Epstein's, by the way. I'm sure you're all really surprised. He sued YouTube. YouTube paid him $24.5 million. He sued Meta. Meta paid him $25 million. He sued Twitter. Twitter paid him $10 million. He filed a $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times. He filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal. He filed another $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC. And NPR and PBS have had their funding pulled, and they have been threatened with just outright banishment. So when the pathological liar-in-chief, Donald J. Trump, is suing the media for lying and winning, I think that tells you everything you need to know, right? That's what I think. Let's wrap up with some solutions, all right, shall we? Because there's a lot of complaining. I'm pretty good at it, but I want to make sure that you know that there are places that you can go to get good information, right? I am a member of the Independent Media Alliance. I was, in 2024 in the summer, I got a message from Whitney Webb, Derek Brose, and Ryan Christian saying that they started this group. There's, I think, 18 of us in it. And some sort of like criteria. You gotta have gotten COVID right. You can't be last guy to figure that out. You gotta get Israel right, so to speak. You can't, be shilling for our most trusted ally. You have to have your eyeballs open. And the group is fantastic. We're talking about content creators, editors, business owners in this group that then have a network that you can check out their information. So as an example, we'll start with the three founders. Whitney Webb, Unlimited Hangout. You can get excellent articles there. Also her podcast. The Last American Vagabond with Ryan Christian. Of course, hopefully you're familiar with his work. It's outstanding. I do a show once a month with Ryan as well called What in the Hell is Happening Here? His work is great. Derek Brose, the Conscious Resistance Network. You can check out everything that he's got going on there. These guys have been doing this for a while. They've been writing about things when it was definitely unpopular and way in advance, too. I read Whitney's NewsGuard article in January 2019 called Guarding the News. Talked about NewsGuard. That was the first time I got on my radar. Of course, now I have a huge problem with NewsGuard. In fact, by the way, not for nothing, but NewsGuard reached out to me and they had a list of grievances for Activist Post. And it was, this article had, what about this and what about that and what about this and what about that? And they've done this before. And they want to give you, there's a red, yellow, and green rating. Green is like MSNBC and Washington Post and all that. Red is Activist Post, right? So they send me a list with all their grievances a couple of times in the past. I ignored them every time. But this time it got me, I was kind of pissed off because I was in the middle of doing this presentation for Anarchapulco, putting it together. And one of the clips that I used was Richard Stengel, former head of Time Magazine. He was the editor-in-chief of Time Magazine, also in the Obama administration. There's a 2-minute clip, and he's at the CFR. He's in a panel discussion. He's taking a question, and the topic comes up, propaganda. And he says, my nickname was the chief propagandist in the Obama administration. I don't have a problem with propaganda. I think every country uses it, and I think they should, and I think there's there's no problem with propaganda. So I use that clip in my presentation. But Richard Stengel, the guy who said that, is on the board of directors for NewsGuard. So I sent the clip to the NewsGuard reporter and I said, care to comment? Why is somebody from your board of directors fine with propaganda? Care to comment? Never heard from him. Isn't that funny? So there are solutions. You can go to Solari.com to get the Solari report. Catherine Austin Fitts, member of the Independent Media Alliance. You can go to CorbettReport.com. James Corbett, member of the IMA. You can go to Off Guardian, off-guardian.org. Get Off Guardian. Kit Knightley, Kat Black, members of the IMA. Great resource for you guys. The Free Thought Project. Hopefully you're checking that out. That's Jason Bassler and Matt Agris over there, members of the IMA. GrandTheftWorld.com. Richard Grove. I mean, you want a 7-hour Sunday podcast? You can get one with Richard Grove. I filled in as a co-host last summer for a couple months on those 7-hour podcasts on Sunday nights. They go till 2:00 in the morning. Yeah, Grand Theft World, sort of like a compilation of some of the greatest stories that were happening during the week. One-stop shop for that. TruthStreamMedia.com. You can find out I mentioned the work that they did for the documentary that I was watching. TakeBackOurTech.org. That's Hakeem Anwar. He's been on this show before as well. Founder of Above Phone. If you're looking for de-Googled phones, privacy phones, Above Phones. He also is the founder of TakeBackOurTech.org. So if you're looking for information on technology, it's a great resource. AMWakeUpShow.com. Steve Poikonen, member of the IMA. Over the target so long, he's been taking flack, he doesn't even feel it anymore. Geopolitics and Empire. Hrvoje Moric. Great dude. Been on this show. Got tacos with him. Got tacos with him in Austin one night. Got tacos with him in Acapulco one night. That guy is all over it. You're going to be getting news from the future. You know what I mean? If you take the time to change your sourcing, to look for better quality, and do this if you can. Get your friends involved. Get them to send them articles. Send them, hey, have you seen this? Send them a link from Activist Post. It's easy to do. I hope you guys will all do that because we're getting it from every direction. If you're looking for, financial advice, stuff like that, dollarvigilante.com, cryptovigilante.io, vigilante.tv. That's Berwick's stuff. Obviously I've done a lot of work with them over the years, and we're co-authors on Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. Obviously, he's the owner of Anarchapulco. There are options. There are solutions. There are people who are doing things differently. The Smith Modernization Act of 2012 legalized propaganda. That probably should have been the indicator that something major was coming. An endless stream of lies. Do yourself a favor. Move out of the way. Hey, if you like this episode, you can take the additional step right now of sharing it with your friends and family. Go ahead and take 5 seconds to go down, rate the show, give me 5 stars, write a little review. If you want to connect with me, macroaggressions.io. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you again soon.